The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Illya Friedman.
Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Cinematography podcast.
We're back
So quickly mostly because Illya and I are recording the host wraps for 23 and 24 here in a row right now.
That's right. So
little inside baseball for you.
Our topical banter this time is not going to be too different from our last topical banter because not too much has happened in the time between these two.
Literally nothing. I hit stop and we both said, "Hey, that was a good take," and then I hit record. So anyway, before we go any further down this rabbit hole, Illya, who is our guest today?
Robert McLachlan. I mean, he had a fantastic war story. He's got a fantastic interview. In fact, he is the first interview that I have done now for the podcast. So I am stepping into your boots a little bit here. Although, here's the secret: this was actually recorded last February or something like that. So it's been in the can for a while. Really glad it's finally coming out. And I think I did an okay job. I'm not going to toot my horn too much. It was nerve-wracking. I got to do a set visit. I got to go
You're
visit.
Awesome, man. Stop being down on yourself. You know all this, you know way more about this stuff than I do, and it's fine.
Anyway, Robert's amazing. His work speaks for itself. I mean, but he's been doing this for a very long time. And most recently, you probably saw Ray Donovan or Westworld or God.
I was a late acolyte to Westworld. Actually, it was the first thing that we watched at home after the baby was born. And we just kind of sat on the couch watching Westworld and, when he slept. And that show is unbelievably great looking.
Also, he did some work for Game of Thrones.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. So anyway, and he talks about all this stuff and a lot more.
So without further ado, here he is, Robert McLachlan.
The Cinematography podcast interview.
I'm sitting down with Robert McLachlan. This is a really cool location that you're at today. Where exactly are we?
We're supposed to be in the English faculty at Princeton.
Ah, okay.
But we are in fact in a heritage house that was donated to the Catholic Church, and the grounds are and all these beautiful new buildings around here. It's basically an old folks' home for priests.
Well, it certainly is lovely, and I think you're going to do a great job of faking it as Princeton because it has that old wood and old world charm going on inside of here. You are a cinematographer, and you've been working in motion picture and television for a long time now, and I guess the number one thing that a lot of our listeners want to know is, how did you get the bug? How did you get interested in this way back when?
Well, my dad was a commercial illustrator and a little bit of a bohemian, and he had a lot of hobbies, photography and Super 8. Well, actually, and originally Original 8, filmmaking being two of them. He drew pictures. He liked movies. He liked photography. There was always a darkroom in the house, and I was really drawn to it. And I really enjoyed photography to the point where even in high school, I was taking some advanced night school courses in fine art, black and white photography at the local university. So I was really into all that. And of course, later in high school, you're even in the middle of high school, every kid, everybody's there's starting to be some pressure on, what do you want to do when you grow up? And the one thing my dad had always drilled into my brother and I was that it didn't matter what you did when you grew up, as long as you loved it. And so the next logical thing to ask myself was, well, what do I love doing and how can I possibly make a living doing it? And what I loved doing was photography, and I loved going to movies. And I'd seen a few documentaries about the making of movies and that kind of thing, and it looked indescribably cool. I think one of the ones that affected me a lot as a kid was one that Alan Wicker, the BBC journalist, did on the making of Grand Prix, which just looked like the absolute coolest process in the world. And of course, then I got to go see the movie on widescreen. It was a roadshow thing, and it was incredibly cool and exciting. And so the goal was to figure out a way to become a cinematographer and make movies. But I was growing up in a middle-class suburb in North Vancouver in Canada, where there was no film industry and there was no tradition of filmmaking or anything. And then the tough part became how do you do that? And what I did was I had trouble getting people to. There was no industry to get a job as an assistant or to be trained in, and what have you. I went to a couple of the mediocre local film schools and got a little bit of a taste of it, but really. My instructors were people who had worked for the National Film Board of Canada and made nature documentaries and stuff. So that wasn't really the best technical grounding for learning how to even light a simple close-up.
Well, yeah, I mean, I could be reading something into this here too, because I just gave you a little preview of my what's going to become my stock question is that. Director of photography or a cinematographer kind of comes down on one side of a line, either more technical or more artist or plumber. I know you're a very technical guy, but your work is also beautiful. So where would you personally draw the line for you? What percentage would you say you're plumber versus artist? I'm
actually not a very technical guy. Once I learned the real basics of photochemical end of photography and how lenses and everything work, it kind of stopped there. At this point, I kind of quickly got to the point, especially with digital cameras, where I don't really give a hoot what goes on inside that box, as long as I know that if I put A in the front, A will come out the back, or B will come out the back, whatever it is that we're trying to do. So, I'm much more inspired, I think, by fine art than any of the movies I've ever seen. When I can make an image that looks as much as possible like a David Teniers or a Rembrandt, or name any number of other Dutch masters or Renaissance painters, then that gives me the most thrill. And also I think those are the guys that wrote the book on good composition and good lighting and interesting lighting and use of mood and tone, and all the great cinematographers copied from that. But I think it's something that, and I know for sure that it's kind of been forgotten in a lot of the film schools and in the film history that you have here. And I think that's especially true in North America, where all the operators I've ever worked with will talk about how the framing in classic movies, and obviously you can't grow up watching endless amounts of network TV and not be influenced by the very sort of standard, rather boring traditions of how a close-up's framed for television. And I've talked about this before, but one of the things I love about working in Europe and love about working with British operators is the Europeans have all been, right from a young age, they've all been dragged through the National Gallery of England and the Louvre and the d'Orsay and the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And they've just soaked up all this amazing art, both lighting and composition, to the point where that's what influences how they build their frames and you build lighting.
You're absolutely right. That's a wonderful lesson in composition and light.
All those things, and I think that more than anything is one of the big reasons why Game of Thrones looks so amazing, because that's their reference point. It's not Magnum PI, and it's or whatever the current hot movie is right now.
Yeah. Well, I think you're being a little bit modest though too, because I know you are technical. You were one of our very first customers for the hot rod PL mount all those years ago, and I've heard you talk about things in a pretty technical way, and you do a lot of stuff with visual effects. I remember the TV shows Millennium and all kinds of stuff that you did, which were VFX intensive television and features. So I know that, and I know that you've got some. And we're not a technical podcast. We don't talk tech, but at the same time, I think you're modest. I think you know a lot about this.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it comes from modesty. Maybe it's how much I enjoy the various aspects of it, and maybe I don't think about the technical side so much. Because when you see a new tool like the mount for the Lumix that you guys made, that I jumped on right away. At the time, I was doing it was one of the early digital shows. We were shooting on Arri D21 initially, and we actually switched when the Alexa came out halfway through the season, which was unheard of.
Wow.
and very exciting. But it was a big action-oriented show called Human Target, and we were not allowed under any circumstances to shoot film because of the SAG rules. So I was looking for, what I needed was a digital IMO, and I read up the Lumix, and the stuff you guys were doing with your mounts and your rigs was the perfect solution for us.
Well, you're very kind, and I was really happy that you guys used it on the show. No, okay, but Robert, we're not talking about me. We're talking about you. So, I definitely want to get get to Game of Thrones, I think that that might be where people know you from most, just because it is such a monster show. But you're also doing Ray Donovan. I didn't even mention we're on the set of The Affair right now. You're doing a lot of stuff. Is there? I mean, you are busy. You are a working guy. Your phone does not seem like it stops ringing.
I've been very fortunate, and I missed season 6 of Game of Thrones because Westworld asked me to come on season 1, and it was an opportunity to actually spend a solid year at home and sleep in my own bed.
That's a great thing.
Apart from that, literally, this kind of synchronicity doesn't happen very often in your career, and I'm very fortunate that's happened at this point in my career, because I love shooting Ray Donovan, I loved shooting Westworld, and I love shooting Game of Thrones, and their schedules, at least until recently, meshed perfectly. So literally for 5 years, I went from Game of Thrones to Ray Donovan to Game of Thrones to Ray Donovan to Game, and so on, literally with a weekend off. And I mean, I'm wrapping, this is my last day on The Affair, and tomorrow I'm getting on a plane to go to New York to start prepping Ray Donovan. And would a break be nice? Yes, but on the other hand, you can't turn up a chance to get to express yourself on shows this good.
And that, I have to imagine, has got to be part of the fun of the job, is that you're getting to work at a high level. You're getting to play with the toys. You're getting to craft the look of shows. You're getting to do all the things that a cinematographer gets to do. And I think it's wonderful that you're also getting variety. A lot of people get pigeonholed or get stuck on one show and get one thing, and then maybe have a really hard time switching. You've got very different looks going on between all these things.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, but really, I think the reason why I love all three of those shows, and especially, Ray and Game of Thrones, was that, on one hand you've got medieval noir, and on the other hand you've got, LA noir, and soon to become hopefully New York noir when the show ships there this season. We're going to try and revamp the look a little bit, but I think, that certainly story-wise and tonally, that's where it's going to go. And I don't think anybody becomes a cinematographer so they can shoot sitcoms or police procedurals. I mean, nobody does that. I mean, a lot of us end up doing it. Certainly I've done my share of both those things, but in terms of job satisfaction, going home at the end of the day feeling like, yeah, we did some nice stuff today. You get to stretch your wings artistically a little more on the dark side than you ever do on the bright side.
I heard a quote. I don't know if it was applied to you, but it was many, many years ago. It was during when Millennium was going on, that I think that someone said that you were responsible for the lack of lighting on that show. That the show was such a a moody noir type of thing. So.
I got credit for how incredibly moody that show was, and it was really. I mean, a lot of hardly any. It was 20 years ago, so a lot of people have completely forgotten it or never heard of it. But it was way ahead of its time and its day. I did get credit for how dark the show was, but the real credit belongs to Chris Carter, who was a very powerful showrunner, probably the most powerful showrunner, seeing that he ran X-Files, which was the Game of Thrones of its day. It was a massive international hit, and Chris had a lot of clout. And normally the network would have come to me and said, because they hate dark stuff for whatever reason, they're afraid people are going to change the channel. And maybe there's a reason for that was explained to me. I'll talk about it in a minute. With Chris went to the network and said, no, this is what I want it to look like. I always had really liked working with him because I had that kind of support, but that doesn't happen all the time. It's only happened now 20 years later, and I don't know how many 100 episodes of television under my belt. And I've got enough gray hair to when you say something ought to look a certain way, nobody argues with you. Whereas when I tried to do it when I was like, I think I shot my first union TV series when I was 32. Nobody put too much weight in my opinions back then. It was like, no, we want you to do it this way.
Well, I think that brings up a wonderful opportunity to tell me, tell our listeners a little bit about the dues paying, because I mean, every cinematographer I know has got some, they got some stuff that maybe they're not the most proud of, or maybe it was a real grind of trying to get it out. You're working on a grand scale now, but it probably wasn't always that way.
Oh my God! I mean, look, when I started out, I had to start. What I did was I started a little production company because it was easier for me to go and talk someone into letting me make them a commercial for their chain of crummy local pizzerias, or an industrial training film for their employees or whatever, than it was to get someone to hire me to actually shoot something. So that way I could hire myself. And I think that really, really heavily and has permanently informed the way I work in a lot of ways, which is I mean, I have no idea because I've never spent much time on any other DP set. I'm pretty much self-taught, but everybody tells me that I'm pretty fast. And I think if I am, it's because I was working for myself and I had to be very frugal and I had to be very efficient. But at the same time, the quality had to be good enough that we were going to get another job because nobody cares how fast you did it. I tried to become fast and I tried to become good, and eventually, and I basically starved I started that company and, I was like 20 something right out of college. It wasn't until I got into the union and in my early 30s that I actually started to make a living wage, and then things really improved very, very quickly after that.
I know Westworld's coming back, but I don't know did you come back?
I wasn't involved in season 2. It overlapped quite substantially with Ray Donovan, and I'm really committed to Ray. And in fact, this season I'm going back as both a director and a producer, as well as a cinematographer on it. And I'm gonna, it's gonna be really fun. I'm really looking forward to it. So that's sort of been my first priority for a while now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Ray. It's a real hit for Showtime, I know. I have a lot of friends who are really big fans of the show. Tell me about working on Ray Donovan, a little bit about your approach. And I'm sure that there's some conversations with, I assume you have different directors who come in for different episodes, and you're carrying that same look through. But what's it like working with a rotating cast of directors all the time?
Yeah, the episodic thing with directors, it's interesting. I mean, obviously you like some a lot more than others. I like the more experienced ones more than the less experienced ones as a rule, because they seem to appreciate what everybody else has to do to get get what they're after, and everybody else has their needs as well. I think I'm probably up to about 350 or 400 episodic directors I've worked with now. I won't name names, but I mean, about a couple of dozen of them ought to be canonized, and about 2/3 of them shouldn't even be in the DGA. That's maybe a bit harsh, but it's shocking who can actually become one. I'm lucky now because I've been working in premium television now for, quote, exclusively for several years, so it's a long time since I've worked with anybody that I would categorize as a hack in any way. You'll find a lot more of that in network television, unfortunately, but I think continually the bar is rising too. So that's an interesting aspect. One of the things that I mostly love about working on Ray Donovan is that nobody tells me what it should look like. Our showrunner Dave Hollander is lovely, and he basically, the standing order is, however Rob thinks it should look is how it should look, and that's the end of it. I mean, he's very good delegating that way, and which suits my way of working, because the longer I've done this, the more I have been able to delegate to my crew as well and not micromanage. It runs in the face of any kind of good morale or anything else. So I'll try and let everybody contribute as much as possible. Then I step back and and keep a very light hand on the wheel if I can. Just you just always have to be ready to yank the car back on the road, but then you let go again. And obviously on Game of Thrones, you're under the pressure because there have been so many DPs on it. Only on a typical season there would be 5 DPs, each doing 2 episodes, and we're all required to not go too far off the reservation in terms of how a well-established set looks. So you have to be very careful as far as that's concerned.
I wanted to ask you about Game of Thrones. It seems to me that there is almost a cast of cinematographers. It seems like it must be a very it's a very grand show, and you have multiple units, I'm guessing, working all the time in multiple cities and around Europe. Is that pretty much the situation?
Yeah, they have a unique deal there. They have 2 complete shooting crews. There's never any second unit or splinter unit as we know it. There are 2 complete shooting unit crews. Their paths never cross. I mean, sometimes they're both in the same studio in different stages, but often they'll be thousands of miles or tens of miles apart. And the director, DP, AD teams hop between the 2 of them. So that's a little bit. The first time I did it, it was really brutal for me because I was so used to working with a really my crew, and now I was working with the producer's crew basically, and it takes a while to get into the rhythm with everybody. Pretty scary, daunting experience the first time you do that show. Every DP will tell you the same thing. It's really tough because you don't know the crews. They've got their way of doing things. You're not in the groove with them, and also you'll get 2 or 3 days with one unit, and then you might be prepping for 4 or 5 while other guys shoot, and then you'll work with another unit for 3 or 4 days, and then back and forth. So until that end of the first season, when I started to really get to know the guys well and we got a nice rapport, it was really, really tough. And you're only as good as your crew.
I think that's really true. It also must be pretty daunting to show up, and now you have triple the number of names you have to remember for everybody. It's like, and you have to then place yourself like, oh, I stepped over to this other set. That person's not here. They're over on the other one. So
it's absolutely brutal. I mean, the first time it took me 2 years to learn most of the crew's name, and as it is, I mean, that crew list, if you went right through it, including
huge.
Practice,
So huge.
there's 1,000 people on that list. And I'm not exaggerating.
No, it's not. I've watched the credits. I mean, I always watch the credits, but it's an army. You've got an army working on it.
It literally is an army, and a lot of the ones whose names don't end up on it, like the Spoils of War episode, the big battle scene that we did in Spain this year. We had a massive UK crew, but then they brought in hundreds of local Spanish technicians as well.
Well, that's a spectacular hour of television. Spoils of War. That's the
loot train attack. Yes.
Yeah. They got written up all over the interwebs as being like one of the most spectacular hours of television that you could watch.
We tried to. They won't tell us what the budget was, but I'm pretty sure it was the biggest budget hour of television ever made.
It wouldn't surprise me. It's great. You've got a lot of projects going on, and we've already talked about how the look of some of these shows, are actually they're even though they're completely different worlds, they do have some similarities and noir and the contrast and different things happening. Tell me about what aren't we seeing? I mean, there's an awful lot of like nuance that goes into this work. There's a lot of little cheats and things. What are we not seeing out there that gets you excited about when you're working? It's like, ooh, I achieved something.
I find that like I can't. I find what I enjoy, and I think I'm probably pretty good at, is rolling with whatever you're presented with when you get to location. Now, obviously, a thing like Game of Thrones, we have a lot of prep time, and you really, really have to have your ducks in a row because, believe it or not, the days are way too short. You only have 10-hour shooting days, and you have to do a massive amount with them, and it's a big machine, and you better be ready to go when you hit the floor, and you really have to have a plan. In fact, as much as possible, we try to have the lights, like the sets, 80% pre-lit when we walk in, or 90% or 100% pre-lit, which is fine. But you know what I enjoy even more is I sometimes, we lost a location, we've got to go to this location, I haven't seen it before, here's the blocking, and making the best of it.
It sounds like an indie film you just described there almost, except that it's an army, and you're trying to roll with it.
Well, you know what? It's easy to do if you've got an amazing crew and 3 truckloads full of equipment, because you can sort of solve any problem. But increasingly, the longer I've done this, the more simple I try to keep everything. And I think any of my guys will tell you, like we're doing a day interior scene in this beautiful old room right now. We had one light inside, which just because I had some dark skin against some light skin, and in order to balance them nicely, we had to bring something inside. But I mean, I would have been happiest, and I'm always happiest with a day interior when there's not a single light inside the room, because why would there be? I mean, it feels better, it feels more natural and organic if it's all coming from outside, as it would be normally. Somebody described the way I work as like Napoleon's battle plan, which apparently, I don't know if you've heard this, but somebody once asked Napoleon when he was like heading towards a major decisive or a major important battle, a critical battle, what his battle plan was, and he said, the plan is first we'll go there, and then we'll see what happens. And it's not as cavalier as it sounds, because obviously you have your you have your artillery and your infantry and your what have you all ready to go, so you can adapt. I've seen cameramen on Game of Thrones who thought they really had it all figured out, but then a curve gets thrown at you and you're screwed, because it dealing with it is going to cost too much time, might cost an extra day, which is the cardinal sin on that show.
It sounds to me like what you're saying is that the number one thing that we're not seeing is the improvising. There's like an improvisational error correction or fixing that's kind of happening on the fly all the time.
Yeah, just talking about it with you now, I listen to a lot of jazz maybe this is the photographic equivalent of playing in a jazz band as opposed to an orchestra.
This has been a really fantastic conversation. I really, really have learned a lot about your process and really enjoyed hearing about Game of Thrones and Westworld and Ray Donovan and now The Affair too. And I guess anything else you'd like to share? Anything else that I haven't asked you about so far that you'd like to throw out?
Just name whatever. I mean,
MacGyver.
I'm sure.
I talk about MacGyver.
MacGyver.
I love going deep on IMDb, and I saw you did some episodes.
MacGyver was my first big network show, and of course, it was like one of the biggest shows on television in its day.
It definitely was.
And I did about, I don't know, umpteen episodes as second unit, which actually was a big deal on that show. It comprised usually about 15 to 20 minutes of each episode, because it was absolutely anything that didn't have MacGyver in it, we shot. And we even did sometimes stuff that did have MacGyver in it. And then, so I did that for a long time. And that was on the heels of a iconic Canadian series that had run sort of an comedy adventure, family entertainment show called The Beachcombers that ran on CBC for 19 years. And
wow.
And it was a great training place. I mean, I can't believe they hired me. The guy, Derek Gardner, who hired me, the executive at CBC, I was 29 or 30, and he hired me to shoot the most famous show in Canada. That was just a massive break and a massive boost in your confidence that somebody would do that. And it meant, well, maybe I can go and, so I accepted the job to go and do second unit on what was then the biggest, American network show at the time. And that, of course, having got that under your belt, that opened the door for a whole bunch of other stuff, much as, all the guys who've ever worked on Game of Thrones are going to have some, and already have had some pretty big feature doors open for them.
I have to imagine, yeah, that's true. I mean, with a show like that, and I know we're heading into what I think is the final season, but I'm not going to ask you to tell anything about it. That's not what our listeners are.
I'm not working on the final season, so I can't tell you a single thing. In fact, I'm really looking forward to it. They're shooting it now. They're over there for like 8 months.
Wow.
Which, I mean, cold. 6 months is, I mean, my last 6 months there just about was the end of my marriage. So, I'm gonna fold them while I'm ahead, as far as that's concerned.
Well, here's to working locally, and here's to being able to maintain good interpersonal relations with your family.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Well, as I see crew members starting to sort of trickle back towards the set here, I know we have a limited amount of time. Where can people find you? Do you exist on the interwebs or Twitter or Instagram? Or
I had a pretty good website for a long time that my brother managed who did that kind of stuff, but he stopped doing it, and I don't think it's been updated for like 5 or 6 years. So I do have a Tumblr.
Tumblr, all right.
I do have a Tumblr with frame grabs of a wide variety of my stuff. I forget what it's called. You might try searching my name. Might be RBM ASC. I can't remember, to tell you the truth.
I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
All right, yeah. If you could find out what it is for me, I'd really appreciate it, because it's a while since I updated it.
You're not the only one. We actually have many people on here go like, yeah, I've got a reel online. It's about 3 years out of date, but or longer.
Oh my God, I haven't done a thing. Thank God I haven't had to do a reel for 7 or 8 years now. But anything that's online is pretty out of date. I mean, there's a bit of stuff. There's a nice variety of stuff, some older stuff that people might not have seen on that is actually accessible on IMDb Pro. But and Vimeo. I think I've got some stuff up on Vimeo too.
That's great. I'll find some links and they'll be added on the show page, camnoir.com. Robert, thank you very much for being on the show. Crew members are coming back onto the set right now. It looks like work's about to start. Thanks so much for the time.
Oh, my pleasure.
So that was Robert McLachlan's interview. Thank you so much, and Illya, awesome job. If I do say so, amazing job doing the interview. And
go on.
You need to do more. You need to do lots more.
Guess what? It's happening.
It is happening in the next episode.
That's right. Next episode is from the person whose war story we're about to hear right now, Claudia Raschke.
And you interviewed her at NAB, correct?
I did. We had kind of a cool experience inside the Tokina booth. They had a setup for live podcasting. They were very gracious to allow us to come and do a podcast there. Claudia came and sat down, and we talked all about her career and life, which is really interesting. And she's shot a ton of stuff. She's shot narratives type of stuff. She came up traditionally through the camera department, but now she's most known for her documentary work, of which several of the documentaries, at least I know a couple, have been nominated for Academy Awards. And she's doing amazing work, including most recently, probably the thing that most people would know from her is RBG, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary, which has got a lot of buzz. And so here it is, Claudia Raschke's War Story.
And now, War Stories.
On the film A Sea Change about ocean acidification, I was working with Barbara Ettinger as a director, and she was very concerned when I said it. I said to her, let us take a boat out and go near the glaciers, because this is about receding glaciers. We should really be there and kind of film the carving of the glacier. And she's like, are you out of your mind? What if the camera falls into the water? And so anyway, but she was interested, and we definitely wanted to go there. So I took the small camera out there, and in order to go near the glacier, we had not a solid boat, but one would say it was a rowboat with a motor. And we had these scientists that were, of course, completely feeling secure about where they would go, but they weren't really quite equipped to know and navigate the waters, because when you are near a glacier that's carving, you have these ice blocks that are floating by, but you are only seeing about 2% of them. And because they're still in the process of floating away from the glacier, they at any time could break and jump out of the water and create a tsunami toward your boat, and you can flip over in the water. Now, mind you, the water is freezing cold. You will only survive in it without any protection for about 30 seconds. So we had already put on these survival suits, which are huge, puffy, orange things, which are very difficult to maneuver around. And so plus there was a certain amount of spray coming from the water that kept flipping onto the lens. And we had to split up in two boats, so I had the director and some scientists in a different boat, and I was with one scientist who was also a little bit more willing to risk things for good angles. And all of a sudden the director calls, like, look over there, the glacier is carving. But when a glacier is carving off, you don't hear it. You first see it. And then a beat later you hear it. So you can't be warned. And it is like that moment of it happened, I saw it, I grabbed it with the camera, and then 5 seconds later, or it seemed like a long time, this humongous thundering sound happened.
Can you hear the ice cracking over here? Oh, yeah. Sounds like dynamite.
Imagine a 10-story tall building falling into the water, sinking down, and then with this huge eruption jumping back up because of the impact. It just has this incredible propulsion to just explode back out of the water, and that causes this big tidal wave that then rushes towards you. And if you're in a tiny boat, God help you. And at that moment, it shook me so much, and I was standing in this nutshell. And then the wave was coming thereafter, that it was this epiphany of, we feel so invincible and so immortal and take these risks without really thinking them through. And sometimes we really pay for it. And I did not fall into the water. The scientists didn't fall into the water, but we were very close.
And now, short ends.
So that was Claudia Raschke's War Story. Tune in to our next episode and you will hear her full interview recorded at the Tokina booth. Thanks, Tokina. They are not a sponsor, but they're very cool. And I own 2 of their lenses and I use them all the damn time, and no one paid me to say that.
They are pretty great. But hey, you know what? Maybe if we, just in the spirit of goodwill, we put it out there. We say how much we like Tokina, and it was nice of them to have us in their booth. Maybe they will sponsor us. You never know.
They could or they couldn't, but their 11 to 16 zoom.
They have a new one too, actually.
Oh, do
really
they?
Cool. They have an 11 to 20.
Oh, sweet.
So it's basically 11 to 16, but a little longer.
+4.
Exactly. It's a great lens. Hey, Ben, what is your short end this week?
So my short end, as I said in the last episode, I've been cheating on our podcast with another podcast, and I don't want to yet say what the title is because you never know, that might change, and a lot of things might change about it.
You'd be embarrassed.
If the title changed?
That's right, because you would say this title and then the title would change. And then you'd be like, oh man, you remember that thing I told you to go search in iTunes? You can't find it.
Yeah, well, and also I don't know when they're going to release it, so I'll probably be pounding it a lot harder once it's getting closer to its release date. But I do want to say that it was like a very different... It almost has no place on the Cinematography podcast. However, it was just like making a movie, but it was like making a movie in fast forward the whole way. So we developed it like it was a TV series. It's 10 episodes. Each episode is 15 to 30 minutes long, but I mean, it can be any length because it's a podcast. As you and I have proven, a podcast can be friggin' 2 hours long, as many people have proven before us, including Mark Maron and whatnot. Like lots of all the
hardcore history.
Oh Jesus, I think I'm still working on the first episode of Hardcore History, and that's a long one. So, but these are going to be about between 15 and 30 minutes. We broke it like a TV series. We wrote the scripts. Each script we wrote, as I said in last episode, we wrote it using fade-in software. The scripts tended to be between like 17 and 22 pages long, and then we cast it traditionally with a casting director, Leah Mangum, who I think you know very well. Mm-hmm. She's cast a lot of the projects that I've worked on over the years, and we saw a gazillion people for it, and got, I think, a pretty awesome cast, and then we recorded it all at a place called Iceman Studios, which is in Burbank, and like 183 pages of script, which is what it ultimately was, we recorded in 5 days. So that meant that like our lowest page count day was still like 35 pages. And, compare this, most people who are listening to us will know this, but like, a movie, like a big movie, you might only shoot like 2 or 3 pages a day. Something that's lower budget, you may shoot like 6-8 pages a day. TV series, probably in that zone, maybe some days as much as 10 pages if you're having an insane day. And then like something that just shoots a huge volume would be like a soap opera, would probably shoot like 20 to 30 pages a day. We were recording 45 pages some days to get through this.
This is why radio is faster to produce than anything visual, because not only is there no light, there's no camera, there's none of all that.
No makeup, no props, no sets, nothing you can look at. Actors can be sweaty and gross, and you can move on. But here was the real challenge, actually. So we have this 183 page script that Bob and I wrote. So like I know every page of it. We've gone through it all many, many times.
Ooh, tell me about page 37.
But it's the 37th page. No, but like what would happen would be like, like say we finish recording like scene 45. Now it's like, okay, next up is scene 78. And you just flip it and you go right into it. Like
there's no delay. There's no hesitation.
And like in a movie set, you'd have like, it'd be like, oh, that's the circle take. Okay, so now we're moving on to, whatever. And you have like 5, 10, sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes an hour to get your head around the next thing.
No, you got seconds now.
It's like literally the owners of Iceman, who were also running the thing. So Evan or Mike would come in and move the boom mic. That would be it. We might block the scene, and we were doing like kind of traditional theater type scene work so that everything sounded very, very natural. And so sometimes we would block a scene, a lot of times we wouldn't. And interestingly enough, like this, every episode of our podcast has been recorded on the Zoom H4n. In addition to all the high-tech mics, actually, Iceman provided an H4n that was the device that this character was using to record on, which we would always figure out where it went in the room or what he was doing with it in a given scene. And so it sort of became a character in it. That all being said, it was just like boom, boom, boom. You had to have your head almost random access wrapped around the whole project. But I think this is a huge... Even if we fall on our faces, I feel like the potential to tell a movie kind of story or just a more complex story using the podcast medium it's a very exciting prospect. Like it was a lot of fun to do, and for actors loved it because they would come in and they'd record all their stuff in an hour or two, sometimes less. And, we got some really accomplished actors to come in and do this thing.
They still got paid for the day, though.
Well, SAG has a podcast rate, actually, and it's done in 4-hour session increments. So, like, people who were there for a day were actually getting 2 session rates, and it's actually not terrible money. Oddly, the Directors Guild has no podcast category at all, because I think they assume that all podcasts are like what we're doing here. But this other podcast that I did, there was literally no difference in the way that it was written with the way you would write a movie, other than just the structure of a podcast is different. And the directing I was doing was as much directing. It was more directing than some of the DGA work I've done in the past.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It sounds like an amazing experience. So I guess your short end this week is, hey, making a fiction narrative podcast is exactly like doing anything visual, except just taking away all the visuals.
And thinking about how to create the, as my father would say, because he's an old radio man, like how to create the theater of the mind using sound effects. And in our case, it was like keeping in mind that anything you're hearing is something that the main character is in a room with, like a Zoom H4n, or in some cases, he had his phone or some kind of microphone or some kind of app recording on his phone, like. Figuring out where all these artifacts came from and kind of creating a story kind of built around them.
Sounds cool.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the next time I see you after this, we might be done with all 10 episodes, because we're supposed to have them all edited by the end of August. We'll see how that goes.
Something tells me I may never see you again.
It's a good chance.
Okay. So, hey, I've got a weird short end this week. My short end is actually something I've always wanted to do and I've never been able to do, and I just found out that I'm doing it. So, hey, without mincing any more words about this, I'm going to get to go to a premiere. I'm going to get to go to a premiere party at the ArcLight for Ozark season 2. I just found out about this. My wife got an invite, and usually when these sort of things come through, we've got kids. We never get to go, but we got a sitter, and I love Ozark, and if you did not, I'm actually going back and I'm rewatching it now.
It's a great show.
It is fantastic, and it actually ties in a little bit to what I talked about in my short end in the last episode, shot in the Univisium 2:1 format, which is gorgeous. And now I'm going to go see that experience, get to go see that 2:1 on a big screen at the Cinerama Dome or at the ArcLight. So I've driven by there. My office used to be right near there, and I'd always see like these premieres and these things, and people walking in on the red carpet and stuff.
That's where we did the premiere for Victor Crowley, which I spoke about on here.
Oh, God. Totally unrelated to nothing, apropos of nothing, but I saw someone else online talking about like their favorite horror films this year or something like that, and Victor Crowley was at the top of their list.
People love that movie.
So yeah. Anyway, so I'm finally going to get to, here's a little bucket list check mark. I get to go see something, and it's for something I really, really like. So that's and there's supposed to be even an after party. So I'm like, I'm all jazzed about going to see the 2:1 aspect ratio on the big screen on something I really like, and getting to go hobnob with these people.
Because I've gone to a few, because one of the benefits of living in LA is you can figure out ways to go to screenings of TV shows in giant movie theaters. Yeah. Like I remember season 3, it wasn't really a premiere, but it was like they showed the first episode of season 3 of Hannibal at LACMA. And it was like on the big screen in a giant theater. Yeah. And it's like you go there, and one of the bummers of it is you watch and you go like, these TV shows look as good as anything you're seeing on movie screens. They look amazing. And a show like Ozark, it's a very cinematic show with outrageously strong visuals and great acting and amazing writing and all the things you want in a movie. And also, obviously it's 10 hours per season as opposed to and 2 hours for a movie or whatever. But like I would see the movie version of that. Like it's exciting to see stuff like that. I went to, because I had worked on a promotional campaign for the first season of True Blood. They had a premiere for the first episode of True Blood at the ArcLight, and I don't know if you're gonna. It's the same thing, but like they even had the party like on the roof of the parking structure of the ArcLight, which sounds like a horrible thing, but actually it's got an amazing view of Hollywood, and when they deck it out, it's gorgeous up there.
Yes, I've parked up there before, and I've also shot up there before, and I'll say we didn't have permission, and so they don't like people hanging out up there. So the fact that they rented out that whole top floor, thing, that's awesome. No, this party is actually across the street somewhere. There's somewhere down the street that the after party is. But anyway, but regardless, I'm super jazzed about it, and I can't imagine something better. I think Jason Bateman and Laura Linney are, of course, fantastic, but the whole supporting cast, everyone else in that thing is
I think
phenomenal.
I mean, nothing against Jason Bateman because he's awesome as well. I think Laura Linney is one of the least appreciated, amazing actors living today. I've never seen her do a bad job. She's so good in everything she does, and it was exciting to watch her in season 1 of that show.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. In fact, actually, I would say that if there was a show like Ozark that they said, hey, we're going to take 10 hours and we're going to put it in the theater, and there was sort of like a movie pass sort of thing, I would go back and I would watch it. I would watch it on a big screen. That is the type of television that is easily big screen. That's easily big screen content.
I've often wondered why they don't do that. Like, why don't they, like, for non-HBO subscribers, have Game of Thrones? It's only 8 to 10 episodes a year. Say, like, every Sunday night, come here, like, for $60 you can see all of them. I would totally do that. Those shows would look great on the big screen.
Mark my words, I think that will happen. I think that is actually a future that we are heading towards. There hasn't been someone who's stepped up to do it. There hasn't been a theater that says, hey, there is some alternative content that is happening, but that I think would be huge and be a wonderful tie-in for the streaming networks, because maybe you can't go see all 10 episodes in a theater, but maybe you can see like 8 of them and still totally worth it for $60. I'd do that.
I mean, serious. I mean, even if it was just the last episode of a show like Game of Thrones.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the big finale is on a big screen. I would go do that, of course.
So somebody rip that idea off if you haven't already thought about it.
Yeah, that's someone out there's hopefully is noodling that through right now.
So we can look forward to the reboot of Family Matters on the big screen when that happens.
Or Elf. So, hey, Ben, where can people find you?
You can find me online at www. That's the World Wide Web for those of you who are new.
You don't say.
The information superhighway. www.benrockonline.com.
I hear it's a series of tubes.
My website and also the internet. A series of tubes. One day I hope to get benrock.com, but it hasn't happened yet. It used to be a boat company. True story.
Wow.
Where they made like boat engines, and then they were bought by another company, and I've asked them yearly if I could have if I could buy benrock.com from them, and they won't let me buy it from them, even though right now there's nothing on it.
There's probably 6 people a year who are being redirected to them.
Well, no, there's nothing on it now. For a while, I was like, oh, yeah, it makes sense. Okay, if you sell one boat motor a year, then there's no amount of money I can give you that it's going to be worth more than that. But right now, there's literally nothing there. Just benrock.com sitting fallow, but they own it, and they won't let me have it. So hopefully one day they'll see the light, and they'll be like, hey, he's not a competing boat company. We can look him up. There he is.
Until that time, you're just going to imagine a bunch of like bigwigs sitting around a off-board motor a coffee table of some sort, smoking big cigars, going, in your face, Ben Rock.
They've actually always been very nice when they said, no, we're not going to sell it to you, but they've always been very cordial about it. Anyway, you can also find me on Twitter at Neptune Salad. I'm also on the Instagrams and the Facebooks, and you can find me if you look even a little bit, you'll find me, no problem.
You can find me too. I'm pretty much the only Illya Friedman out there, and hotrodcameras.com.
That's a boast. You sure there's not another Illya Friedman in the whole world?
There is one, but he spells it with one L, and I've got 2 L's in mine. So we became friends on LinkedIn actually.
That's cool.
Which is pretty funny. So it's just the 2 of us. So it's either like attorney in Russia or Illya Friedman, like camera guy. So.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. So anyway, sorry, you are at
hotrodcameras.com, the sponsor of the show, Hot Rod Cameras. You've heard of us?
Yes,
once or twice.
And then also.
And then, of course, you can find us on the Instagrams and, of course, the camnoir.com, which is our official website where, we're actually going to be adding some extra stuff there soon, too, which will be fun.
Yay, fun. I like fun things. We'd like to thank Ben Katz for doing an amazing job with all the editing on all the post.
Thanks, Mr. Katz.
As always, we want to thank K's Alatractchi for every scrap of music that you've heard in this. Please go to www.musicbyks.com.
Why? He doesn't listen to us. He's never going to know.
I want somebody to go there, and I want someone to send him an inquiry and say, I heard your work on the Cinematography podcast, and it's awesome. You don't have to even offer him a job. Just say, hey, I like your work, and it'll make his day, and he'll feel good about having helped us all these long years.
I bet if we actually just asked people to go troll him, they might do that.
I mean, totally troll him. I wonder if we can get Charles Pappert to troll him. I mean,
ooh,
It's been like 2 episodes since we mentioned him.
Yeah, we haven't heard from Charles in like a couple days. Maybe.
Anyway, and then as always too, we wanted to thank Alana Kode for her awesome producing and helping us line up all these interviews and keeping the fire lit under my butt to keep churning these out and getting us staying on Ben Katz and all the whole crew. That's the crew. You know all of us.
You know all 4 of us. All right, fantastic. Hey, looking forward to our next episode with Claudia Raschke.
See you then.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.